Hey guys, tonight we're setting off across a black velvet ocean, with nothing but the stars above and the sound of water tapping gently against the side of a carved wooden canoe. No engine, no compass, no radio tower buzzing in the background. Just you, a few others, and thousands of miles of open water. This is how the ancient Polynesians did it, and somehow they made it work. You're lying there, the canoe rocking beneath you, the night air soft and salty. You stare up at the sky, wondering which bright spot is going to keep you alive tomorrow. You inhale slowly, exhale even slower, and maybe you feel that tug of sleep already pulling at your eyes. Good. That's the point. But quick reality check. You probably wouldn't survive this. Most of us would have floated in circles until dehydration made us a seagull snack. These voyages weren't lucky guesses. They were feats of genius wrapped in chants and clouds, passed down by memory over generations. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening somewhere far from the Pacific, drop your city and local time in the comments. I love seeing where all these sleepy travelers are tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit in the canoe, eyes adjusting to the dark. The sails are quiet, barely catching the breeze. There's no talking, just a steady silence as if the ocean itself is listening in. The night sky above you isn't just pretty, it's functional. Those stars? They're highway signs. Some ancient navigator figured out long before clocks or sextants or TikTok that the sky is like a spinning chart. It rises, rotates, and resets predictably. And if you can memorize which stars rise where and how they move through the night, you can sail between islands thousands of miles apart without ever once glancing down. The Polynesians knew this. They mastered it. They used something called star paths, specific sequences of stars that rise and set along known axes. Picture this. You know that after the bright star Altair climbs into the sky, the swell should be coming from your right. If it's not, you've drifted. Adjust. Keep the star on the right side of your sail and you're golden. Now think about this. You're doing this night after night, on an open canoe the size of a modern delivery van, with no GPS voice going, recalculating. If a cloud blocks the stars for too long, you don't panic. You wait. You trust your body to remember the motion of the swells and maybe, just maybe, you murmur the names of the stars like a lullaby, hoping they come back soon. Historians still argue whether the average Polynesian voyager had this knowledge, or if it was restricted to elite navigators trained for decades. But regardless, someone on board knew how to read that sky like a book. And not just any book. A book you could only read while floating in the dark on a moving platform, with sleep deprivation and salt spray in your eyes. Easy. Then there's the moon. It's not as reliable for precise direction, but it helps. On certain routes, its position gives you timing, a rhythm. And that's important. Because without instruments, your internal sense of pace becomes part of the map. You might know, for example, that after Sirius reaches its peak, you should have traveled roughly 80 miles, assuming the wind behaved and your paddlers didn't take too many coconut breaks. Let's pause for a moment. Look up. You're lying flat in the canoe again, back pressed to warm wood, eyes wide. You spot the Southern Cross tilted just so, and you whisper its direction. Southeast. Keep it to the left of the mast, and you're on the path to Rapa Nui. That's a solid 2,000 miles. A casual weekend trip, right? And the sky isn't static. Over months it shifts. So Polynesian navigators learned different star compasses for different times of year. You wouldn't use a December sky to find a July island. That's how precise it was. These weren't vague, feel-it-out guesses. They were rotating calendars encoded in firelight and memory. You can almost hear a chant start behind you. Soft, repetitive. A teaching tool. The old navigator murmurs the names of stars, their directions, their roles in various voyages. Each line is like a hyperlink. Click it and 1,000 years of seafaring data loads into your mind. Well, assuming your mind's not already halfway to sleep. And here's your quirky tidbit for tonight. Some navigators practiced on dry land using stone circles that mimic star positions. Yep, they essentially built star simulators. Not quite a planetarium, but the Stonehenge meets surfboard aesthetic is strong. What's fascinating is that even without precise distance tools, they still managed fairly accurate travel. A star might rise at 85 degrees on one island and 86 on another. That's a change you can track if you're paying obsessive attention. And they did. But even with all that, there's debate today among scholars. Some argue Polynesians occasionally did get lost and discover islands by chance. Others push back hard, pointing to consistent cultural transfers across vast island chains as evidence of deliberate planning. The truth probably lives somewhere in between. Mastery layered with mystery. So you float on. The stars are your ceiling, your map, your calendar, your guiding voices. And they're comforting. Because even when everything else is uncertain, the clouds, the currents, your crewmates' attention spans, the stars stay steady. They rise in the east. They arc overhead. They whisper direction in their silence. The canoe rocks gently. The waves hush against the hull. And maybe your eyelids flutter for a second too long. Don't worry. Someone on this canoe is watching the stars. And if they forget, well, the ocean's got plenty of surprises in store. The stars slowly dim as the horizon begins to blush, and you shift slightly in the canoe, shoulders stiff from sleeping on wood. But no one speaks. The silence isn't awkward. It's intentional. You're still navigating, still listening, still feeling your way forward. Because as the sky brightens and your celestial map fades away, the next phase begins. You now rely on what's stored in your head. Star paths aren't just memorized, no, they're internalized. Deeply. Rehearsed and repeated like lullabies for the brain. A trained Polynesian navigator, what some island cultures call a wayfinder, knows dozens of these star paths. Not just which stars rise and where, but how they move through the night, how their arcs shift with the seasons, and how they relate to each other like old friends circling a fire. You trace a path from the horizon where Vega rose, across to where Antares is now fading. In your head, this arc is a road. A long curved line leading east by southeast. You recall how the elders described this part of the sky as a kind of spine. Stable, predictable, a backbone for the voyage. You use it to steer not just the boat but yourself. Because here's the weird thing. You're not actually staring at stars all night long. Sometimes you're asleep. Sometimes it's cloudy. So how do you follow a star path you can't always see? You remember it. You don't need the star in your eye. You need it in your mind. So you carry the entire arc in your imagination. You see it even when it's hidden. You steer to a memory. That's navigation. And just to keep things spicy, this is happening while the canoe is bouncing like a floating trampoline. You've got seawater drying in your hair, your feet are basically prunes, and your dinner was maybe 2 bites of dried fish. But somehow your brain's still running full-speed night math, plotting angles and timing on a mental chalkboard that no storm can erase. It helps that you're not alone. The navigator might have an apprentice, someone repeating chants softly, confirming the position of stars, tracking the hours like they're stringing beads on a necklace. Some chants are just beautiful. Others are raw data in disguise. A line that seems poetic, something like, "When the great fish leaps to the sky, follow the path of his tail," actually tells you to track a star cluster and turn when it sets. It's astronomy wearing a floral shirt. Historians still debate how much of this system was standardized versus unique to each island group. Some evidence suggests that even within Polynesia, different cultures use their own preferred stars and myths to encode the same basic paths. So one navigator's shark's jaw might be another's canoe bearer, which is kind of like arguing whether you use Apple Maps or Google Maps, same destination, different vibes. Oh, and here's your quirky tidbit. Some islanders believe the stars aren't just guides, they're beings. Relatives. Guardians. Ancestors literally watching from the sky. So when you look up at a certain cluster, you're not just seeing twinkling plasma, you're seeing Auntie Lua, who will definitely be disappointed if you crash this canoe. Now, as the sun rises and the stars vanish, you lean on your memory. But not just for sky stuff. You remember time. In traditional wayfinding, time isn't kept with a watch. It's kept with rhythm. How long does a chant last? How many paddles to the next shift? How many waves between rest stops? If you've ever tried to estimate a minute without looking at a clock, you know how slippery time can be. But you've trained. You've got internal metronomes ticking in your bones. It's not just poetic. It's wildly practical. You also remember distances by how stars move. For instance, when a certain star rises to a particular angle, say 1 handspan above the horizon, you know roughly how far you've traveled. Not precise, not GPS level tight, but close enough when the stakes are survival. And it worked. Really did. That's why people made it to islands like Hawaii, Rapa Nui, and even New Zealand, all separated by hundreds or thousands of miles of unbroken ocean. That's not luck. That's a mental performance we'd call genius today if it weren't so quietly humble. But of course, the ocean doesn't care about your memory. Clouds can last for days. Storms can chase you off your path. Your brain can betray you. Make you think you're drifting straight when you're slowly veering off like a shopping cart with one wonky wheel. So navigators developed cross-checks. They'd look at birds, clouds, swells, even the color of the water. But mostly they'd wait. And they'd trust. And when the stars came back out again, they'd look up, compare, and course correct. You might go a full night guessing, only to confirm your path hours later with the glint of Venus rising right where you hoped it would. Relief washes over you like a wave. You're still on track. Auntie Lua isn't mad. One scholarly theory suggests that some voyages took intentionally conservative paths, zigzagging in wide arcs to ensure landfall, even if it meant longer travel. Others argue that voyagers had enough skill and confidence to aim directly for small islands with eerie precision. The truth? Likely a mix. Cautious when needed, bold when conditions favored it. And speaking of bold, you're now nearing the next stage of your mental chart. The star path you followed all night is about to dip below the horizon. Another will rise soon, signaling your turn. It's like switching lanes on a cosmic highway. Smooth if you're ready, jarring if you're not. You mumble the names of the next 3 stars. Just to yourself. Just loud enough to remember. One for direction. One for timing. One for reassurance. You know what comes next. The sky told you. The sea confirmed it. Your memory holds it all together like rope lashed across wooden beams. There's no panic in this canoe. Just steady practice knowing. And a quiet rhythm like breathing, like drifting, like sleep. You've lost the stars now. The morning has fully stretched across the sky, and that celestial highway you were cruising along? Gone. Packed up and tucked away until nightfall. But your journey doesn't pause. It deepens. Now you shift your weight slightly, eyes closed, hands resting on the canoe's edge. You're not watching anymore, you're feeling. This is where things get a little weird for the modern brain. Because now you're navigating by something you can't see, something you don't even really hear. You're listening to the ocean's whispers, through your body. You lie flat on the deck. Face up. Arms loose. Legs still. It looks like you're taking a nap, which to be fair you wouldn't mind. But no, this is navigation. Real navigation. You are tuning your body to the swells. You feel them long before you think about them. A slow rise and fall. Then a second layer of motion. A more subtle rhythm like a heartbeat under the main pulse. That's the swell pattern. The Polynesians knew how to read this invisible Morse code of the sea. You don't just feel that there are swells, you feel where they're coming from. North-northeast, maybe. And you know that island back behind you generates that swell. Meaning, if that pulse is still behind you, you're probably still on course. This sounds ridiculous until you realize they did this for real. For generations. With consistent success. Some modern reenactments have even proven that trained navigators, lying silently in canoes, can accurately identify the direction of multiple swell patterns. That's like tuning into 2 or 3 radio stations simultaneously with your skin. Historians still argue whether this was common knowledge, or a specialized elite skill reserved for master navigators. But the tradition of feeling the ocean persists in cultures across the Pacific, even where other wayfinding knowledge has faded. It's the kind of thing grandfathers passed down with a quiet smile and a tap to the chest saying, "It's in here." Your quirky tidbit for this section? Some say navigators even stuck their heads into the water, like upside-down periscopes, to listen to swells more directly. Others deny this, saying no one wants a saltwater ear infection at sea. But the mental image is fun. A line of voyagers bobbing their heads like pelicans trying to eavesdrop on the sea. Back in the canoe you're still. Still enough that you start to feel time stretch out again. Each swell cycle becomes a metronome and you can feel if it changes. If the pattern gets deeper, sharper, quicker, you know the wind shifted. If it fades into a lazy roll, maybe you've entered a current or passed the lee of a distant reef. You're listening with every inch of your body, even the sunburned ones. But waves aren't always solo performers. The ocean likes to layer. You might feel a long, slow swell from the south, a reminder of a storm that passed days ago, and over that, a shorter chop from the east driven by today's breeze. A good navigator knows both, can feel both, and can track which island or wind system each one belongs to. It's here that navigation starts to feel more like poetry. You're not following a map, you're dancing with patterns. You adjust your heading slightly, aligning the canoe so the swell stays steady against your hip. Not too much, just a degree or two. But over hours, those degrees mean the difference between landfall and endless blue. Now the apprentice, sitting a few feet from you, leans forward. He says nothing, but he shifts his weight. You both felt it. A new rhythm. A cross swell. Faint but there. It means you've entered a convergence zone. Could be two weather systems colliding. Could be a subtle ocean current. Could mean land is closer than you thought. You glance toward the horizon, though you know you won't see anything yet. Still, your muscles are already tightening with anticipation. Subtle, almost superstitious, but it works. These signs have led canoes to safety for centuries. Polynesian canoes weren't little hollow logs, by the way. These were double-hulled voyaging vessels, basically catamarans, long before modern boaters thought it was cool. They could carry people, animals, food, even plants for starting life on a new island. So yeah, no pressure or anything, just keep everyone alive for weeks with no compass. And they did. Over and over again. You shift again, lifting your head, blinking into the soft light. Clouds drift lazily overhead. The sails creak. One paddler snores quietly, slumped under a woven mat. But you? You're still listening. Still reading the ocean. Another quirky detail. In some traditions, navigators describe swells not by compass direction but by island names. A north swell might be called the Kaina swell, named after a cape on Oahu. An eastern one might be the Hiva swell, from a far-off Marquesan island. It's a reminder that geography isn't abstract out here. It's lived. The sea has memory, and it whispers it to you one wave at a time. You place your palm flat on the deck again. The canoe rocks gently, still on the swell, still in rhythm. Slow, this kind of travel. So slow you can feel your thoughts decelerate. You stop counting hours. You start counting heartbeats. You lean into the rise and fall like it's a lullaby. And maybe, just maybe, that's why this all works. Because the ocean doesn't need you to rush. Just needs you to listen. You whisper the direction to yourself. Softly. Affirming. North by east. The swell confirms it. You're still on the invisible road. Still cradled in ancient knowledge. Drifting forward with the rhythm of your ancestors. No charts. No compass. Just you and the sea, speaking a language no one writes down. Your legs are sore. Your face is sunbaked. You haven't seen land in days. But above you the sky hangs open like an old secret. And below you, the ocean rolls with the steady rhythm of something alive. You are still voyaging. Still trusting signs that most people would miss entirely. And now you're about to chase birds. Yes, birds. Because once the stars have disappeared and the swells have smoothed into something almost too subtle to read, you start to notice them, small black specks arcing through the sky. Not many. Just a few. Maybe a solo flyer flitting off to the west. Maybe a pair circling, then disappearing behind a curtain of low clouds. And your heart skips a beat. Because those aren't just birds, they're clues. Polynesian navigators knew seabirds better than most birdwatchers ever will. They didn't just know the names. They knew the habits. Which ones fly far out to sea and which ones always return home by dusk. Which ones forage alone and which ones travel in chatty squadrons. Which birds mean land is 50 miles away. And which mean you're basically already late for dinner. You sit up slightly, shielding your eyes. That bird over there? Long wings. Low flight path. It's a frigate bird probably. That's good. They can range far, but if they're heading in a line, not meandering, it could mean they're on their return flight. And that means land. Frigate birds nod as turns. Each species has its own radius, like a feathered compass rose. Some only travel 20 to 30 miles from shore. So if you see one in the late afternoon, flapping with purpose, you might as well be holding a glowing neon sign. Island this way. Historians still debate how intentional this bird-watching navigation was. Some argue it was more instinctual, observed casually over time, then folded into broader navigation. Others claim it was studied, precise, even ritualized. What we do know is that voyagers relied on it, repeatedly, successfully, enough that bird sightings became part of the mental map. A quirky tidbit? In some island traditions, specific birds were believed to be the incarnations of ancestral spirits guiding the canoe. So spotting a particular bird might not just mean, hey, we're close. It might mean Uncle Kaipo is watching out for you, which is both comforting and slightly unnerving if you're on bathroom duty in the back of the canoe. You notice the flight path again. Same direction. 2 more birds now, cutting across the sunglare like black darts. They're not circling. They're not feeding. They're going somewhere. Probably home. That means you can start guessing. The mental calculation goes something like, birds plus time of day plus flight direction equals island location. It's not perfect. Sometimes birds are just doing bird things. Sometimes they fake you out, like when a tern flies 40 miles just to grab a snack and loops back without warning. But the longer you watch, the more you recognize patterns. Behavior. Intent. You mention it to the apprentice. He nods, says nothing, but his hands tighten on the outrigger brace, like he's filing the observation away, like he's bracing for landfall, even if it's still hours away. Here's something else you notice. The color of the sky starts to shift. Not dramatically, just faintly. But you've been watching sky for so long that now, even a subtle haze means something. Maybe it's cloud cover rising over an island. Maybe it's light reflecting off sand too far away to see directly. Some navigators call this land backscatter. A glow that spreads across the base of clouds, visible well before the island itself appears. Again, no proof. No instruments. Just you, guessing based on light and birds and your own stubborn belief that your ancestors weren't just lucky, they were experts. Some canoes even carried trained birds. This isn't fantasy. It's recorded in multiple oral histories. The birds would be released into the air, and if they circled and returned, land was far. If they flew straight and didn't come back, bingo, land in that direction. They were like living homing beacons, if slightly poopier. You lean into the wind, watching that same group of birds grow smaller in the distance. You're trusting them. Not blindly, not stupidly, strategically. They're part of your toolkit. Just like the stars, the swells, and the memory songs your grandparents taught you when you were still too small to reach the outrigger. There's a kind of comfort in that. Like you're never truly alone. The sky watches you. The waves nudge you. And even the birds are helping steer. You scan the ocean again. A ripple here, a flash there. Not dolphins, too still. Not waves, wrong shape. You squint. Floating driftwood? Seaweed. Debris. That's another sign. Birds plus debris? That's like getting a location pin in the street view. You're close now. Maybe less than 50 miles. If you had an outboard motor, you'd be there before lunchtime. But you don't. So you keep sailing. This entire practice, reading birds, watching drift lines, noting cloud texture, isn't just art. It's science. It's pattern recognition pushed to its extreme. It's training your mind to be a radar, your skin to be sonar, your eyes to be telescopes with patience. Even now, centuries later, researchers aboard traditional voyaging canoes like the Klee use these same techniques to test the old ways. And they still work. Not because the ocean got easier, but because the knowledge was always there, if you knew how to look. Your stomach growls. The sun is climbing. The birds have disappeared ahead. But you keep your heading. North by west. You whisper the direction like a spell. Somewhere out there an island waits. It doesn't know you're coming. But you do. The birds told you. And the sea is listening. The sun's beginning to flex its muscles now. It pushes upward with the soft menace of a heat lamp in a lizard enclosure. And you're the lizard. The salt crust on your skin is starting to itch. A paddle creaks somewhere behind you. The sails flutter, briefly confused by a swirl of warm air. You squint at the horizon and refocus. Not on birds this time, but on your ride itself. Because no matter how skilled you are with stars, swells, and seabirds, none of it matters if your canoe is a clumsy bathtub. Canoe design wasn't just a matter of practicality for ancient Polynesians. It was part of the navigation system. The shape, size, and structure of your vessel dictated what kind of journey you could even attempt. This isn't a dugout hollowed from some backyard tree. It's a finely tuned machine crafted for survival and just as crucially for memory. You're sitting on a kaulua, a double-hulled voyaging canoe. It glides across the waves like it was born there. And in a way it was. The twin hulls, lashed together with coconut fiber rope, give the canoe its stability. It doesn't roll like a European-style keelboat. It dances, balanced and nimble. A single hull would be faster, but it would also flip every time a jealous gust sneezed sideways. So this dual design? It's the sweet spot. Steady but not sluggish. The shape of each hull is slender and curved, like a crescent moon stretched long. They're shallow drafted, which means they don't sink deep into the water. That allows you to skim over coral reefs, ride gentle swells, and pivot quickly if needed. Useful when you're racing a storm or trying to avoid, say, accidentally discovering a volcano. Historians still argue whether there were regional schools of canoe design. Some say each archipelago developed its own subtly different hull shape based on local currents and wave behavior. Others argue the designs were more standardized, passed down from master carvers who moved across islands like woodworking wizards. Either way, your quirky tidbit for this section. Some old voyaging canoes had sails made not just of woven pandanus leaves but of plaited human hair mixed into the fibers, possibly as a sign of sacred protection or prestige. If nothing else, it adds new meaning to don't lose your hair over travel logistics. But back to the ride. These canoes aren't nailed together. They're lashed, tied, bound using natural fiber cords and intricate, obsessive patterns that distribute pressure evenly across the frame. That means when your canoe hits a rough patch, waves, crosswinds, a particularly cheeky dolphin, it flexes instead of shattering. It bends, breathes, and holds, like a living thing. And that's kind of the point. You're not just in the canoe. You're part of it. You shift slightly, running your fingers along the smooth gunnel. The wood is warm, oiled, darkened by salt and sun. Took months to carve. Not days, months. A canoe wasn't just built, it was grown. Trees were chosen carefully, often ritually. The carvers were specialists, often with strict taboos on diet, speech, even dreams during construction. If they sneezed wrong, someone might suggest starting over. You think that's excessive until you're 5 days from shore in open water with no backup and a 20-foot swell knocking politely at the hull. The platform between the hulls, the waimamau, is where you spend most of your time. It's where you sleep, store supplies, maybe chant quietly to the stars when you can't fall asleep because you're too busy trying not to worry about sharks. It's also where the navigator stands, usually barefoot, reading the sea with toes curled slightly over the edge. It's not exactly OSHA approved, but it's elegant. Wind stirs again, stronger this time. You adjust the triangular sail, called a crab claw for obvious reasons. These sails don't swivel like modern ones. You have to reposition the whole mast if you want to tack. Which, yes, is annoying, but it's also simpler in the long run. Fewer moving parts. Fewer things to snap when Poseidon's having a tantrum. And they work. Oh, they work. Tests have shown that with the right wind, these sails can push a voyaging canoe faster than many modern sailboats. And the whole vessel responds like a trained dog, turning on a whisper, surging forward on a gust, holding its line across swells like it's reading your mind. It's easy to forget you're hundreds of miles from land. The canoe doesn't feel lost. Feels in place. Still, every few hours you do a check. You examine the lashings, retie any loosening knots. You scoop seawater onto the wooden seams to keep them swollen and tight. You bail the bilge with a half coconut shell, rhythmically and without complaint. These little tasks are rituals, not busy work. Each one is a quiet conversation with your vessel. You good? We good. Okay. Sometimes you swear the canoe answers. There are stories, old ones, of canoes that turned themselves away from danger, of hulls that shivered before storms, of rudders that refused to bite into water when the direction was wrong. Maybe it's myth. Maybe it's real. Either way, when you're alone on the ocean with nothing but rope, wood, and your own heartbeat to trust, you're willing to listen to anything. You shift again. The deck creaks slightly under your weight. Not a worrisome sound. More like the canoe clearing its throat. It's alive, remember? Not in the Disney movie sense, but in the this thing could kill me or save me depending on how I treat it sense. That counts. The apprentice has fallen asleep again. His head is lolling over a coil of spare rigging, mouth open, snoring softly like a gourd with a hole in it. You'll let him nap. He'll take the next watch. For now you stand. The sail catches. The hulls hum softly as the canoe finds its rhythm again. You glance down, not at the waves, not at the birds, but at the canoe itself. It's not just your vehicle. It's your compass, your protection, your partner. And as long as it holds steady beneath your feet, you will always have a path forward. The wind has a new voice now. It's cooler, edged with a dryness that tells you the night isn't far off, even if the sky still burns in that blinding late afternoon gold. You press your palm into the breeze, feeling its shift, its lean, the whispered stories it carries across the open Pacific. You're not just catching a breeze. You're catching directions. Because Polynesian navigators didn't just read the stars or follow birds. They felt the wind. And now it's your turn. You tilt your face upward and take a slow breath. It smells faintly of salt, warmed wood, and something else. Something dry and sharp, like the edge of an island breeze that's traveled too far from its home. You turn your head slowly, gauging the angle the wind hits your ears, your cheeks, even your eyelashes. Ridiculous? Maybe. Effective? Definitely. You've been taught that wind isn't just a matter of speed or temperature. It's a language. Subtle, yes, but fluent in its own way. Easterlies mean one thing, westerlies another. A sudden gust out of the north could mean a front is rolling in, or that a nearby island is creating wind shadows you can't yet see. Navigators cataloged wind patterns like a chef memorizing spices. There wasn't just wind. There was moe, the gentle trades. There was ahu, a light morning breeze. There was kona, a storm-bearing southwesterly that you do not want to meet without your lashings triple-checked. Historians still argue whether Polynesians had literal names for every wind, or whether the terminology varied from island to island. Some believe these terms referred more to the feel and purpose of the wind than its scientific properties. Others think they acted almost like GPS tags. Oh, that's a Kahikalo wind. Turn the canoe 10 degrees east or you'll miss Tuvalu entirely. Right now, your own canoe is gently rocking beneath the weight of a southeast breeze. It nudges your sails, flutters the lashings, cools the sweat along your back. And you smile. Because you know this wind. You've felt it before. It's trustworthy, at least for now. Quirky tidbit incoming. In some traditional navigation training, apprentices were told to listen to wind through a gourd. Seriously. The gourd would amplify the pitch and subtle shift of breezes, letting the listener attune their ear to the music of direction. Kind of like an ancient Bluetooth headset for the weather. You turn slightly to adjust the sail, not because it needs it but because you need the reassurance. Each line you touch, each angle you fine-tune, is another layer of dialogue between you and your floating home. You don't shout commands. You whisper changes. The wind listens. And then comes the real trick. Using the wind to guess where you are. Because here's the thing. Certain island groups generate their own microclimates. Subtle weather patterns that only exist within a few dozen miles of land. Clouds stack differently. Winds shift direction ever so slightly. Temperatures drop or rise with no warning. These aren't coincidences. They're clues. You close your eyes and feel the air on your left shoulder. The breeze is steadier now. Less playful. It's flattening out, dragging low across the water like it knows something you don't. That's a land signal. You open your eyes and scan the clouds. Yep, there it is. A faint bulge near the base of the cumulus, like someone puffed a secret breath beneath the sky. Land backscatter. You've seen it before. You'll trust it again. Some navigators say you can smell land before you see it. They're not wrong. Volcanic islands give off faint earthy scents when you get close. Bird colonies have their own distinct aromas. Coconut groves, burning wood. Even wet foliage carried on the wind like an unintentional welcome banner. And sometimes you smell nothing, which is its own kind of eerie. Like the ocean's holding its breath. But back to the breeze. You run your fingers through it again, pretending for a moment that it's a person you're dancing with. And maybe it is. The wind has moods. It laughs, it sulks, it panics. You learn to read those moods before they become disasters. Which brings us to one of the oldest tools in your invisible toolkit. The wind map. Not a paper one. There's no parchment tucked in your waistband. This one lives in your mind. Over years, you've memorized the way winds shift across the Pacific throughout the year. You know when trade winds blow strongest. You know where doldrums lurk like sleepy crocodiles. You know where storms breed like mosquitoes in a puddle. That knowledge isn't static. It's dynamic. It updates constantly based on what you feel right now. You're not a computer crunching numbers. You're more like a weather whisperer, tuning into patterns that don't care whether anyone believes they exist. Mainstream fact time. Modern meteorologists have confirmed that Polynesian sailing routes often aligned almost perfectly with prevailing wind systems, especially the easterlies near the equator. Coincidence? Not a chance. These voyagers weren't guessing. They were harmonizing. But that doesn't mean it's easy. Right now you're adjusting again. A barely there shift to the west tells you that the wind is curling, probably due to an island mass upwind. That's your next breadcrumb. You file it away. You won't steer based on that alone, but it stacks, like layers of sediment forming land beneath your feet. The apprentice stirs behind you. He groans, then mutters something about fish. You let him sleep a few more minutes. He'll learn the winds too eventually. But it takes time. A decade maybe. Or two. Or a lifetime. You keep sailing. The sun is sliding lower. The clouds are glowing at the edges now, soft and gold, like they've been dipped in honey. The wind cools a fraction more. You tighten your cloak. The canoe creaks gently, accepting the new wind angle. Everything is communicating. You just have to keep listening. And the wind, kind as it is tonight, is telling you, you're on course. Keep going. Night slides in without asking. 1 minute it's a golden lull of sun and wind. The next it's stars nudging their way through indigo velvet. The horizon melts, the canoe blends into shadow, and you're just here. Suspended. No land. No lights. Only the hush of water and the creak of rope. And yet you're not lost. Because this isn't a blank canvas, it's a map. A living one, stitched from memory and motion. Your mind flickers through positions, not as GPS dots or latitudes, but as feelings. Muscle memory. A sense of place. You've never seen a chart. You don't need to. You've got something better. A mental atlas crafted from everything you've ever felt, watched, or heard out here. It's called attack. And it's how you're going to find your way without looking. Attack is not about where you are, it's about what moves. You begin, as always, by choosing a reference point. A star. A cloud. Even a floating log will do. It doesn't matter if it's stationary, only that it's visible. Then, as your canoe moves forward, you track how that reference point appears to move behind other reference markers. It's a system of relationships, not absolutes. You're the one in motion, but you imagine the world moving around you. Weird. Sure. Effective. Absolutely. Let's make it less abstract. Say you're watching a bright star hover above a particular point on the horizon. That point becomes an attack island. Not a real island, but a place in your head. As you sail, that star seems to drift past other reference markers like clouds or other stars. You count how many imaginary islands it passes, and each one tells you how far you've come. It's like watching telephone poles blur past on a highway. Except there's no road, no poles, and no highway. Just the sky and your ability to remember where things used to be. And yes, historians still argue whether attack was a universally used system across Polynesia, or if it was more common in Micronesian traditions. Some suggest it evolved separately in different archipelagos. Others insist it was a shared language of voyaging. Either way, it's mind-bendingly brilliant. To do this well, your memory needs to be sticky. Like disturbingly sticky. You're not just memorizing a few stars. You're holding entire sky maps in your head. Star positions. Swell angles. Wind direction. The feel of water on your ankles. The rhythm of the canoe when it's angled slightly northeast versus east-northeast. All of it stays with you, piled in layers. Not jumbled, but ordered. Like mental folders you can open at will. And those folders, they're organized in song. Yes, song. You hum under your breath now, softly, like the ocean might be listening. It's not a lullaby. It's a map. A sequence of verses, each tied to a different segment of your journey. One line might remind you where Sirius should rise on the third day. Another might link to the pattern of swells between two known islands. It's part chant, part spreadsheet, part Google Maps with rhythm. And you know every word. The quirky tidbit? Some of these navigational chants had to be sung while standing on one foot. Not as performance art, but as practice. Because standing like that forces you to engage your body's balance systems, your kinesthetic compass, if you will. It's believed to help integrate mental maps with physical orientation. And yes, it makes you look like a very serious flamingo. Right now, you're cross-checking your mental waypoints. There was a star cluster that should have risen half an hour ago. It's late. You're adjusting. Maybe the wind has nudged you a few degrees too far west. You correct by feel alone, brushing your fingers along the steering paddle and applying the tiniest pressure. You're not worried, because your internal map isn't fragile. It's dynamic. It grows with each moment. You think back to the beginning of this voyage, how you mentally pinned a star on the eastern horizon as your first attack point. From there, every change in the sky, every swell beneath your hull, has layered another point of reference onto your route. Even your sleep cycles are choreographed around memory. You don't nap randomly. You rest when it's safe, when your body won't forget what it's learned. And when you do sleep, you dream of movement. Not metaphorically. You literally rehearse the route in your sleep. Over and over, the canoe slides through remembered waves, past star islands, toward imagined landfalls. It's not superstition. It's training. Mainstream fact time. The Polynesian Voyaging Society's modern efforts with CLE, the replica voyaging canoe, have confirmed that skilled navigators can make ocean crossings thousands of miles long without instruments, guided only by memory, waves, stars, and what they call the felt sense of position, which is basically attack but with sunscreen. You lie back on the woven deck matting, hands folded behind your head, staring upward. The stars will above you like a carousel. You can read them now like chapters in a book. A cluster near Orion's belt reminds you of the first night on this voyage, chilly, full of nerves, with that one flying fish that nearly broke the apprentice's nose. A single bright spark in the north recalls the second day, when a cross-swell almost tricked you into adjusting course too early. Each reference lives in memory and in the sky. Attack is an art of trust, not just in the stars but in your own body, in your balance, in your instincts, in the endless annoying muscle twinges that tell you when the canoe's drifted 2 degrees too far south. You sigh, eyes still tracing constellations. You don't need a map. You are the map. You haven't spoken aloud in hours. You don't need to. The ocean speaks for you now, every creak of the lashings, every soft slap of the swell against the hull, every ruffle of wind whispering past your ear. But in your mind, your ancestors are telling stories. Long ones. The kind that win through chants and riddles, the kind that hold more information than any textbook ever could. Because navigation isn't taught with lectures out here. It's sung. It's recited. It's wrapped in tales of birds who married stars and gods who hid islands beneath their cloaks. And you're the latest listener in a chain of listeners stretching back hundreds, maybe thousands of years. This is oral tradition as navigational aid. Welcome to the ocean's oldest operating system. You adjust your seat, shifting your weight just enough to keep balance as the canoe leans into a new rhythm. Beneath you, the swell has changed, slightly tighter spacing between crests. Another clue, another mental note. But alongside it, you're repeating a line in your head. When the second daughter of the moon raises her hand, follow the child who runs west. It sounds poetic, maybe even silly, but that phrase marks the timing and angle of a specific constellation relative to the trade winds. Tells you when to shift tack, when to expect a directional change in the swells. It's data disguised as myth. Historians still argue whether these chants were ever formalized into something resembling curriculum, or if they were entirely oral, passed through repetition and ritual. Some suspect proto-navigational schools existed among the elite. Others believe every detail was embedded within families, secrets shared only among a chosen few. You take a breath, letting that thought drift. Either way, the stories are doing their job. There's a tale you know, one your teacher whispered on your first open water voyage, about a great navigator who could hear islands singing to him beneath the waves. He followed their echoes across hundreds of miles. Did he really hear voices? Probably not. But the story carried something useful. The acoustic signature of land echoes, and how low-frequency sounds bounce differently near shorelines. Practical? Surprisingly, yes. Romantic? Always. Another chant fills your mind, this one almost melodic. 2 birds circle, but only one returns. Watch the one who yawns wide. Land lies where she tires. You smile softly. That's your signal to track seabirds in pairs. Often, one ventures farther while the other stays close. The one that tires and dips low? She's telling you a nesting place is near. An island. Maybe even the one you're looking for. These memory tools aren't dry lists or crammed flashcards. They're sticky, rich, and vivid. You don't forget them because they're stories, because they rhyme, because they make you laugh or wonder or shake your head. You remember them because they feel like yours. Quirky tidbit. In some island groups, navigational chants were performed in the dark, in communal houses with the only illumination coming from tiny holes in the roof mimicking stars. Apprentices had to recite directions and routes while pointing at the sky above them. Miss a star? Restart the verse. Drop a line? You're peeling coconuts for a week. And yet you do it all again. Because the ocean isn't just water. It's memory. And those who remember best are the ones who return. Right now, you're threading through a stretch of open sea with no land for at least 200 miles in any direction. But you don't feel lost. You've got dozens of breadcrumbs in your head: star paths, wave angles, chants, and you keep reciting them in rhythm with the swell. You're counting without counting, sailing without seeing, trusting in verse. There's a verse for the morning fog, what color it should be, how fast it should burn off, and what it might mean if it lingers too long. There's a verse for the scratchy creak of a damp hull, a warning of wood strain when temperatures shift suddenly. There's even one for the taste of air just before a storm. You lick your lips now, catching only the soft tang of salt and nothing more. All clear. You turn to your apprentice who's humming something under his breath. You recognize the tune. It's a children's version of a directional chant, simplified but accurate. He's remembering. That's good. Because this knowledge isn't written down. It lives in heads, in tongues, in careful repetition. Mainstream historians agree. Much of the traditional Polynesian navigational system survived only through oral transmission. No charts, no inked coordinates, no measuring tools. Just memory, mentors, and meticulously coded stories. You shift your gaze upward. The stars are bold now. Clear. That one there, bright and low? It's part of the Kukau Makalii, the canoe-shaped star group. Tells you you're still on track. And within your mind a verse hums. When Makalii kneels, lean west. When he runs, lean east. If he vanishes, pray. Simple, playful, useful, especially when paired with what your feet are telling you. The swell has turned again. Slightly. It matches the verse. You adjust course a breath to port. You've never seen these instructions written down. And you hope you never do. Because part of what makes them powerful is the act of remembering. You earn this knowledge. It roots into your bones. You don't just know where you're going. You are the direction. You are the chant. One more verse echoes in your thoughts as the clouds build on the far horizon, hinting at dawn. This one about arrivals. About the patience it takes to make landfall after so long at sea. About how islands often appear as dreams before they become real. The apprentice asks if you'll tell it to him. Not yet. First, he must remember this night. The wind is shifting again. A subtle bend like a sigh in the dark. You lean into it. Adjust the steering paddle with 2 fingers, and feel the canoe hum in response. It's listening to. This next part of the journey? It's not just practical navigation anymore. It's spiritual. You're entering the realm where ritual and reason overlap, where offerings meet observation, and where unseen forces are treated with the same seriousness as swell direction or cloud type. Some call it superstition. Others, insurance. Because when you're hundreds of miles from land, surrounded by endless blue, your fate depends on more than technique. It depends on harmony with the elements, with the spirits, with yourself. And that's why sacred rituals exist. Not just for ceremony, but for survival. There's a bull tied near the mast. Inside, dry leaves, shell fragments, and something that looks like a crumbling biscuit. It's not a snack. It's part of an offering, prepared before you even left shore. A ritual kit. You remember the priest's voice as he packed it. Never throw it overboard in anger. Only when the sea is listening. Now the sea is listening. You kneel carefully, take a small pinch of the offering, and let it drift from your palm like a whisper. The wind lifts it, then drops it into the waves with a soft splash. You don't say anything out loud. The gesture is enough. Historians still argue whether these rituals had consistent meanings across the Polynesian Triangle, or were shaped by each island's culture. Some suggest they were formal navigational rites, permission from the gods to cross certain currents. Others think they were deeply personal acts, ways to calm the navigators' nerves before the night took hold. Like carrying a lucky keychain but with more chanting. And yes, chanting was everywhere. You remember hearing it from the elders. Low, rhythmic, barely above a murmur. Some chants were invocations to named winds, asking them to stay steady or to return. Others were warnings, spoken to storms already gathering. And a few were for the canoe itself. Because yes, the canoe is more than wood and lashing. She's a VAA, a being with spirit. You never board her without asking. You never leave her without thanks. Her name is whispered before you sail, and once again upon safe return. There are nights like this one when you swear she sighs beneath your feet, not in complaint but in acknowledgement. She knows you're listening. Quirky tidbit. On some voyages, sailors tied knots in strands of coconut fiber to track prayers or wishes made during the trip. If they reached their destination, the knots were untied one by one, each with a whispered thanks. If they didn't reach land, the knots stayed tied and were returned to the sea. Right now you've got 3 knots tied. One for safe passage, one for the apprentice's first crossing, and one for a dream you had last night, the one where a dolphin circled the canoe 3 times and then vanished westward. You haven't told anyone about it yet. You glance upward. The stars are shifting again. Henaiya Kamalama is descending. An anchor in the southern sky. You trace her position, match it to the swell's direction and nod. The timing lines up. The ritual worked. Or maybe the sea is simply being kind tonight. Either way, you don't question it. Because rituals aren't about control. They're about connection. Connection to your crew, who each touched the offering before departure. To the ancestors whose bones rest in distant islands you've never seen but carry in your breath. To the sea which doesn't care about your cleverness, but does respond to your respect. Mainstream fact? On the voyages of Klee, modern Polynesian navigators blended traditional knowledge with revived rituals, offering chants, blessings, and taboos. They reported not only a sense of focus but also improved morale and cohesion among the crew. A sense that something was looking out for them. And when you're out here, that matters. You move silently to the bow and place your hand on the wood. It's warm from sun and salt. You whisper a thank you. Not in a formal chant but your own rhythm. The canoe rocks gently, and the wind picks up again. Your apprentice stirs behind you, murmurs in his sleep. You let him rest. Tomorrow, he'll need all his strength. You'll be reaching land soon, maybe within 2 days. But this is the part of the voyage where focus matters most. Because this is where navigators falter. The mind plays tricks this close to land. Phantom islands appear in clouds. Bird calls echo in your head even when there are no wings above. You might imagine the scent of soil or the crunch of sand when neither is near. That's why the rituals ground you. They remind you, stay patient. Don't rush. The sea will reveal land when it's ready. You reach for the 4th knot, hesitate, then let it be. Not yet. Let the dolphin keep swimming westward in your dreams a little longer. As you settle back onto the deck, you realize you've been humming a chant again. Soft half-formed words. It's the one about returning home. How the stars lean in when you near your destination, and the sea quiets its breathing. You whisper it once more just to be sure. Then quietly the clouds begin to part. You blink into the misty light of morning. It's gentle, that in-between shade of gray where the stars fade but haven't quite let go, and the sun hasn't made its full declaration yet. This is the breath of day. The quiet inhale before the world stretches awake. And something feels different. You sit upright slowly. The canoe is gliding smoother now, like she knows the destination is near. Your apprentice is already awake, staring quietly at the horizon, rubbing sleep from his eyes with the back of his wrist. You don't speak. Not yet. There's a stillness that shouldn't be broken. You smell something faint. A trick of the imagination, maybe. But it's there. A dusty sweetness. Not the clean salt of open ocean, but the soft earth scent of land. You glance at your apprentice. He nods once, solemn. He smells it too. For thousands of years this moment has meant everything. You're on the final stretch now, the place where everything you've observed, stars, swells, birds, clouds, currents, rituals, verses, must coalesce. You don't see land yet, but you know it's there. And that knowledge is the final gift of ancient navigation. As the light grows stronger you look up. The clouds have broken, just slightly, to reveal a low bank of towering cumulus, flat-bottomed, fluffy, and suspiciously rooted in one place. You don't need to say it. Your apprentice grins. Land clouds. You've seen them before. They form as warm air rises from the earth, much denser and more anchored than their ocean cousins. A sign as old as the canoe itself. Historians still argue whether these clouds were intentionally tracked or just noticed by accident over centuries of trial and error. But to you? Doesn't matter. You trust the sky's punctuation marks. You adjust course toward the cloud bank. Not a major correction, just a slight lean of the paddle a breath to starboard. The swell supports the shift. It agrees with you. And now the birds appear. 3 frigates slicing wide arcs. One of them dives almost playfully, then shoots upward and veers west. You watch it carefully. Then you catch another motion lower this time. A turn. Small, fast, twitchy. Land dwellers. They don't travel far from nests unless they have to. Another confirmation. Quirky tidbit. Ancient sailors used scratched coconut shells as makeshift compasses, not with magnets, but by floating a sliver of bark on a bowl of water, then aligning it using the bird's departure angles. Not foolproof but clever. You're not using a bowl right now. You've got your eyes, your nose, your bones. And those bones? They're humming. You call softly to your apprentice and nod toward the cloud bank. He begins the chant, the landfall verse. Low, almost shy. It's the one he practiced at night back on the island, fumbling the rhythm, forgetting the end. But now he sings it clearly. The words come smooth, anchored in something real. Where sky rises, and the sea sleeps, the mother's arms cradle stone. I return. I return. It's not just poetic. The chant helps pace the final leg. It cues the navigator to begin the checklist. Change in swell rhythm, check. Increase in bird traffic, check. New scent on the wind, check. Clouds rooted in place, check. It's as much a logbook as a lullaby. Mainstream fact? On several reconstructed voyages of the Klee, land was located within plus or minus 10 nautical miles using nothing but these traditional techniques. That's better accuracy than early European sailors armed with sextants and charts. Let that sink in while your GPS tries to reroute you in the middle of a parking lot. The apprentice finishes the chant. You both sit in silence. Then there it is. Not a dramatic volcanic peak. Not a Hollywood palm-topped beach. Just a low smear of dark green at the base of the cloud bank. You almost miss it. But it's there. Solid. Still. Real. Land. You exhale long and deep. Your shoulders release the tension you didn't even realize was there. You mutter thanks to the canoe, to the stars, to your teacher who taught you that island echo chant, and to the swell for not misbehaving. You untie one of the knots. The apprentice sees and smiles. You leave the dolphin knot tied. Some dreams are worth keeping. And now the final rituals. Before you step on land, you must offer thanks. Not loudly. Just a small bit of food to the water, a drop of sweet drink if you have it. A prayer, not for success but for humility. For arriving without arrogance. For remembering the sea always has the last word. You close your eyes and let the canoe drift just a little longer. Because this is it. The end of the voyage. The apprentice will carry this in his memory now. His version of the stories, the chants, the stars, the quiet rituals. He'll tell it differently, of course. That's the point. The journey is alive. You smile as the bow touches calm, shallow water. The air smells richer now, fruity almost. Ferns maybe. And earth. The sea behind you is still moving, still offering lessons. But for now you rest. Word count. 1066. Wind down 300 words. And now, as the canoe settles into the bay, and the last stars dissolve into daylight, you breathe slower. The ocean behind you fades into memory. Not gone, just softened. The swell is quieter now, almost a lullaby rocking you in a cradle of rhythm and salt. You've arrived. The chants, the verses, the knots and birds and cloud signs, they're all gently folding away, like sails after a long voyage. The voices of your ancestors quiet to a whisper. The wood of the canoe creaks in satisfaction. You've made it. Let your body relax, like water returning to stillness after motion. Let your thoughts become gentle currents. No direction, no pressure, just drift. Maybe you still hear the apprentice humming softly. Maybe the scent of distant island flowers is still hanging in the air. Or maybe you've already begun your own dream voyage. guided not by instruments but by memory. Tonight you learned how ancient sailors moved across impossible distances without maps, without screens, without needing to look. You felt the stars in your bones, the wind on your skin, the pull of invisible landmarks speaking through the waves. And you made it. You arrived. So let go now. Sink into the stillness. Let the fan hum become the ocean breeze. Let your breath match the calm roll of the tide. There's nothing left to prove. No more waypoints to check. You are here. And the sea? She's proud of you.